Well, unless this is a white-collar crime.
Stacey Colbert is believed to have gone missing from her apartment on March 22nd of 1998. Years would go by without any new leads or finding Stacey, till over 6 years later when a man found something when he was out looking for his dog.
We were driving in. I worked at Cardinal. We both worked at Cardinal. And I heard the story that they found remains, although they reported it was like a 40-year-old, but I still got those little hairs raised on the back of my neck thinking I have a really bad feeling about this.
It just makes me so angry to think about, like, that was her final resting place.
Now on Just In Case You Forgot.
Just In Case You Forgot podcast is produced and hosted by William Swafford. Music was put together by William Swafford.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Years would go by without finding 23-year-old Stacey Colbert. Stacey's family and friends can only do what they can to keep moving forward. I believe that everyone that I have talked to for this podcast kept some kind of hope that Stacey would be found alive, while knowing deep down that Stacey would never be heard from again. Any hope that Stacey might come back to her family and friends come to an end in the year of 2004. Over 6 years after Stacey had been reported missing by her sister Danielle. In the year of 2004, Stacey would have been 29 years old. On November 27th of 2004, a Saturday, in Delaware County, which is the county just north of Franklin County, a hunter, a man by the name of Ray, had gone walking around looking for his lost dog in a wooded area by the Scioto River. This area is off of State Route 257 north and northwest part of Delaware County. Ray was in an area south of Hoskins Road, near the town of Radnor. While walking around in a wooded area, Ray had stumbled over something. Ray had stumbled over bones. These were not animal bones. They were bones that belonged to a human skeleton. The media would pick up on the news of skeletal remains being found on the edge of a cornfield and a wooded area in Delaware County. The Maryville police thought that the remains could have possibly been a missing Honda worker named Patty Atkins. Patty had been missing since 2001. All Delaware County law enforcement knew at the time was that they had no missing people in Delaware County. Law enforcement would spend 3 days searching the area where the human remains were found. They could only find what they thought was 70% of the bones that would make up a human skeleton. The majority of the remains were found buried underneath tree limbs and debris. The Delaware County Coroner and the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation was on the scene in northwest Delaware County. Investigators would send the human skull to Ohio State University to be looked over by a forensic dentist to try to identify the human remains. Law enforcement would say that they could not determine how long the human remains were at the spot where they were found. The cause of death of the victim is unknown. There had been workers in the area where the bones were found, because there had been a brush clean out 5 years before the bones were found. That would have taken place in the year of 1999. The Delaware County Sheriff at the time said to the media that Delaware County was like a body dumping ground for the surrounding counties. The forensic dentist at Ohio State would start to look over the human skull that was found by the hunter. I did read somewhere that after 2 hours of comparing the skull with dental records that they had come up with a match. Law enforcement always tries to notify the family members first. Here's Danielle, Stacey's sister.
So I was at work, and I was actually, me and my husband at the time, we were driving in. I worked at Cardinal. We both worked at Cardinal. And I heard the story that they found remains, although they reported it was like a 40-year-old, but I still got those little hairs raised on the back of my neck, thinking I have a really bad feeling about this. And I got back to my desk, and the detective left me a voicemail that said that they found her remains. They were afraid that it would be out in the media before they could tell me, so they left it as a voicemail.
They left it as a voicemail?
They did.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, yeah. It was...
That's a little impersonal.
It was kind of soul-crushing. So, it was awful. I left work almost immediately. I couldn't handle it. So it's just, you think after 7 years, you're braced for that. I mean, so, through the duration of this, you don't give up. Like, you don't lose hope. There's still that, little piece in the back of your brain and the back of your heart that wants the best, most positive outcome and still believes that it could happen. Like, that something you haven't imagined, that maybe, amnesia and she's living her best life. Like, until you get to that point where it's no return, this is it. It's in your face, and her life is done. It just, you think you're prepared for it because 99% that after 7 years, that's the probabilities if you're talking math. And that call just extinguished any type of hope that could even be at that point for her life, returning back to any semblance of what that life would be. During the meantime, she had a lot of student loans, and, having those bill collectors, it was, at the 5-year mark, my mom and I actually went to the judge to try to at least close out her estate. So, we've tried to get some semblance of closure along the way so that mom and I can not, die in on ourselves of grief. And, I can't, that's even just a little bit of the surface. And, that was kind of the real, what I call teapot moment, where all the steam goes out, that all those things that you've kind of you have this memorial service, you do these things to try to get that, I don't know, closure or whatever, but it's still not, because somebody, when they disappear off the face of the earth, there's all these questions, all these things that go through your mind. And, my family and I are all analytical. My dad was a podiatrist. My dad passed away right after my babies were born. And, my mom was a teacher, and, me, I'm, an analyst. I'm a data analyst. And, I can't really talk to the depths of emotions that you go through when you're dealing on this track. But finding the remains, having that call on voicemail was just a shocker. It was, you listen to it. I'll tell you, I had to stop listening to the news, because every time it could be that call, you keep expecting you're going to get that call, and then finally, probably at the 5-year mark, I wasn't really I thought, well, maybe it'll happen, but I'm not going to listen to the news anymore and try to figure it's going to be it, right?
Yeah.
So that 7 year, there'd been a couple of years since I'd really, thought about it. But even though there'd been that string, right, the string of bodies that were found, I didn't really react except for the one when we were on that way to work. So, so it was, but even at that time, even though her remains were found in Delaware County, her apartment was in Franklin County. There was a lot of jurisdictional things that happened. I believe that until it was ruled a cold case, that they were still working on it in Franklin County, transfer. There was things happening in Delaware and things happening in Franklin. They had to do that transfer. There was a lot of politics that happened between that. I wasn't involved. A lot of it just kind of stagnated some of those things that were happening, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I could not believe that law enforcement left the news about Stacey on a voicemail for Danielle. Stacey was found in November of 2004. over 6.5 years after going missing, 4 months away from 7 years. The Delaware County Sheriff at the time made an announcement at a news conference that the skeletal remains that were found in their county had been identified as Stacey Colbert, who had been missing from Columbus, Ohio since 1998. This is Katie and what she had to say when I asked her how she found out that Stacey had been found in Delaware County.
Yeah, so I was really, I think for the years after that, I was preoccupied with it, but also living with it, just kind of what, hopefully something will come out. And I had some weird habits. Like I got into the habit of I would scan the sides of the roadways when I was a passenger in a car. Like maybe I'm going to spot, bundled up remains. It seems really insane, but just in my head, I would think she's got to be somewhere. Maybe it's this place. So whenever a body was found and reported in the news, it would always catch my attention. And so in November 2004, I was actually on maternity leave with my first son, and a detail in a news story one day just stopped me cold. So they mentioned they found skeletal remains of I think they said a young to middle-aged woman, and that she was small in stature. And there was something mentioned about a great set of teeth or extensive dental work, something like that. And Stacey had a lot of dental work done at Ohio State when we lived together, and she was really just known for her smile. And so I knew those were going to be her remains before her sister even called me to confirm it.
Back in March of 1998, this all started off as a missing person investigation. 3 days after Stacey had gone missing, it was treated like a homicide investigation without even finding Stacey. Move forward to the year 2004, a Franklin County missing person / homicide investigation was now a Delaware County homicide investigation.
I was at work, and I got a phone call, and I'm just trying to remember who I got a phone call from. It was one of my friends, and they said they found her, and it was just like an instant reliving of all that pain, all that trauma, all that sadness and grief just came welling up. I remember just being in a state of shock and then having to go home. I remember telling my husband about it, who also knew Stacey, and just everything coming flooding back. And I remember seeing on the news when they found the remains, and that there's a high likelihood that it could be her. It just brought everything back in waves. And then just hearing the horror of it, it just gives you something else to replay in your mind over and over again, knowing where she went, just imagining what that person did to my amazing friend, and where she was just left, dumped on the side of a river in a farm. It just makes me so angry to think about, that was her final resting place, just being exposed to the elements. It's just grief and anger. It was just overwhelming. It did not bring peace. You always think this is one step closer and you're going to feel peace and it'll bring closure. It does not bring closure. It does not bring peace. That won't happen until the person who did this has been brought to justice.
It would be hard to find closure when there were still so many questions to be answered. Then there's the fact that whoever done this to Stacey is still out there. Here's Paula and how she found out about her friend Stacey.
So I was home with my kids. I remember it was the first day of Advent, and I was getting my kids ready to go to church. They were very little. My son was a year old. My daughter was 3, and my phone rang, and once again, it was Alicia calling me, who had called to tell me she was missing. She called to tell me that Stacey's remains had been found.
I asked Paula how getting that phone call made her feel.
I don't remember. It was kind of like, when you're in a movie and someone is standing there and all of a sudden, like, everything around them becomes this long, hazy hallway. You can't really see straight. Everything is around you is just kind of muffled and muttered and distorted. That was kind of how I felt. I was trying not to cry because I didn't want to upset my daughter. She's been a highly sensitive child since the time she was little. Like, she experiences pain with other people. So I was trying to be really strong for her, and she was very excited about going to church, and we were new at this church, and I barely held it together that whole time we were at this event and making little kids crafts. But then when I came home, I just fell in my husband's arms and fell apart. Even though I knew she was dead, I knew they weren't going to find her alive. As long as she was still missing, there was still just that glimmer of hope. Denial, whatever you want to call it. And that was gone. I knew I'd never see her again.
Hey, true crime fans, if you like Just In Case You Forgot, you will also want to check out Murderers in Ohio on YouTube. Murderers in Ohio is about men and women who have been convicted of murder in the state of Ohio. And it is hosted by myself, Bill Swafford. So go to Murderers in Ohio on YouTube and subscribe now.
So we got a killer on a run in Ohio.
Delaware County investigators had a victim from another county that they knew nothing about. Here is Ashley.
Oh my gosh. I was living out in DC, and for some reason my power was out. And so I had everything turned off. And I had turned off. By that time, I had a cell phone, and I had turned it off for some reason. And I finally flip it on. It's like that night, and my mom had called me and said that they had found her, and that it was her. And it was, I thought honestly when we were doing the missing campaign that we would find her alive. Like, I really, really did, and that's something To hear that, to hear the finality of it, and to hear where she was found and how she was found, and like, it was crushing, and it was, but it was also a relief to know where she was, and that, he took her out of the apartment, obviously, and that she wasn't suffering anymore. Was good to know.
Any hope of possibly finding Stacey alive had been taken away from her family and friends. Now there's the question of how did Stacey get from her apartment in Columbus, which is in Franklin County, to a field by the Skeletal River in Delaware County. Delaware County law enforcement would start off with some disadvantages. Stacey had gone missing over 6.5 years before being found. They would have to work with law enforcement from Franklin County just to get caught up with the investigation that was done in Columbus. I know that I've already said that the Delaware County Sheriff at the time said that Delaware County is like a body dumping ground for the surrounding counties, which Franklin County is one of them. However, I still can't help but have one question. Did Stacey know anyone with any connection to Delaware County? And maybe do some kind of farm work. Farmers used to hire summer help like high school kids and college students and pay them under the table for the summer. I asked Ashley if Stacey had any friends who could have had any connection to Delaware County or does any farm or tree work.
She did, there's all different types of fraternities and sororities. There was an agricultural one that she did spend time at. I don't know of anybody in that fraternity, so there's definitely kind of an aspect of that in her social life. My cousin lives in the county where she was found, and you can take all the descriptions from all the articles and triangulate it. So I was showing it to her, and she was like, "Oh, someone has to have known that area pretty well." So maybe a farm worker would get to know that area well, or someone with ties to that area. Certainly, I think my cousin pointed out that it's almost so far north; it's almost in the next county. Yeah. So it's not just like you just like rolled up in there; like you're pretty far.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get. I do another podcast about convicted murderers, and a lot of times, like we were talking earlier, if it was just a sudden act of rage or somebody just flipping out, the body is going to be left right there or in the vicinity where it's not out of the county or out of the city. And most of the times that in most of the cases that I've covered, the person usually knows when they leave, at least when they're leaving the county or the state, they know where they're going.
Yeah.
There's only been a very few that didn't. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm kind of wondering if that person, because that's like thanks they told me it was a 45 minute drive. I don't know. I've never been up that way.
It's 29 miles. I've done it like 45 minutes.
Really?
And it is a straight shot up Riverside Drive. So it's, it definitely could have happened that night. I think she was somewhere else first.
Yeah, because
even at that time of the morning, like a couple of weeks ago, I was driving my parents to the airport at like 4:15. I wasn't driving north on that particular road, but I was kind of on a main road here in Columbus, and was desolate. So if there was anything going on at that time of night, probably wouldn't have seen much or had that many people on the road.
Here's what Paula had to say when I asked her the same question.
No, I can't imagine that Stacey even knew. I mean, I'm sure she was aware of the town of Delaware, but no, there is no way she knew about any of that. I even wondered for a while, I'm like, did she know anyone that went to Ohio Wesleyan?
Well, it could have been somebody that come in for the weekend. You know what I mean? For a college party. Or it could be, or there could be a college student who did farm work during the summertime.
That's a really good thought.
Because a lot of farmers hire summer work. And because I was thinking about that location, because I looked through all them articles you got on Facebook there, and it was talking about how they could only determine that the skeletal remains was only there for about 2 years. That's the only far back that they can determine.
Right.
And there was a brush clear out within like 5 years.
Yes, they were looking for someone else. Yes, I remember that.
I know all of this is a long shot, and law enforcement probably has already looked into Stacey's friends. However, I still can't stop wondering about it.
And I said, it could be somebody that was maybe a college student or something that maybe had graduated but had done summer work for a farmer or something out in that area.
That's a really good thought, Bill. I never considered that, and I don't know.
Here's Paula again.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can make that drive out to where she was found. I mean, it's not easy. It's probably 45 minutes to an hour. Like it's a long drive. And like you said, You have to know where it is to know where it is. The killer didn't just stumble on that by accident.
I did ask Danielle if Stacey had any friends with any ties to Delaware County.
Did Stacey have any friends that had any ties to Delaware County?
That's a good question.
Danielle could think of one person, but couldn't remember the name for that person.
Yep, so the friend that helped her move, it wasn't the boyfriend. Her boyfriend was in out of the country, or in Texas, wherever that.
Yeah.
So the friend that helped her move, his family has a farm out in Delaware County.
What's his name?
What is his name? Shoot. I met him only briefly, so...
Unfortunately, Delaware County would not have much luck with their investigation. The location where Stacey was found did not give any new leads. The cause of death was unknown. They could not say for sure how long Stacey had been in the spot where she had been found. Years would go on, and that investigation into Stacey's death would turn into a cold case for Delaware County. Stacey's investigation would be handled by several different detectives throughout the years. The detective that is currently working the investigation is Detective Jeff Bessinger, who is with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department. Here's a little bit of what Danielle had to say about Detective Bessinger.
Which is great. And I'll tell you, once her remains were found and he became involved, that he really has done quite a bit in the background to help move things forward, for sure. Like 7 years, so since everything happened.
Stacey's family and friends were finally able to say their final goodbyes to Stacey and to put Stacey in a proper resting place. I have read articles about when Stacey's remains were found. I had seen a few with titles like, "It's an End to a Mystery, Remains Identified." I couldn't help but think that those titles, those headlines, were wrong. It is no end to any mystery. Yes, Stacey was found, but we don't know how she got to Delaware County or how 23-year-old Stacey Colbert died.
Stacey was not flirtatious or all that much into dating, but she did like men, and she got set up platonically a lot of times for like sorority date parties with friends of friends. And she had her first real relationship when we were living together in the apartment, so she was maybe 21 by that time. She wasn't someone that was into like hookup culture or frivolous with herself like most of us were at that age. And so I think that contrast of sort of her innocence or naivete and then the violence that ended her life is sort of destroying to me. I feel like no one deserves to be a victim, and she also didn't do things that I would consider putting herself at risk. And I know you mentioned the jogging, like could she have left the door open and somebody got in there? I just felt like in general in her dating life, she wasn't taking a lot of risks. And just when you look at the odds of when a young woman is killed, who does it? It's normally some kind of a romantic relationship or some sort of at least a fling. And so I just don't feel like she was out putting herself out there. For some reason, I would like that to sort of be known that she just was a person that was pretty safe, I thought, in general. And then I feel like for me, I was kind of like, I was changed forever by going through this. I'm sure her friends were too. I just, initially I couldn't stand to be in a room alone for a while. I needed lights to be on. I was checking door locks. I needed an alarm system, and I couldn't really do anything joyful. And then, over the years, I just have been able to live with it, obviously, go on and have other fun things. But I just still think about how unfair it is that we don't get to have her in the world. And it changed how I look at the world, that something like this happens to someone like her. And maybe that sounds naive, because out there in the world, there are tons of grieving people, and there are tons of people that are taken too soon. But just being that close to it and surprised by it had a huge impact.
On the next episode of Just In Case You Forgot, I will be talking to Detective Jeff Bessinger from Delaware County, Ohio.
My name is Jeff Bessinger, and I am currently a sergeant with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office when a hunter looking for his lost hunting dog located a skull in the woods. That started the investigation for Delaware County.
Then I will be going over some theories that people have thought about throughout the years.
Do you remember hearing anything?
Most people at the time expected to find out she'd been killed by the same person who killed Stephanie Hummer, because at that time we didn't know who had killed Stephanie. That was still a huge mystery. And I don't know if you know much about that case.
But when you look at like the layout, so you have the apartment, her car, I don't know, like 20, 30 feet would have been parked, and whomever was there was probably parking their car 20, 30 feet. I mean, it happened at 2, 3 in the morning. This is before, everybody's Ring camera would go off when you get like motion detectors and things like that. If this person did that, it would only take them like a couple minutes tops to transport Stacey to their car and then leave.
That's next time on Just In Case You Forgot. Please remember that this is still an ongoing homicide investigation. If you have any information on the death of Stacey Colbert from Columbus, Ohio, please contact the Delaware County Sheriff's Department in Ohio.
Just In Case You Forgot podcast is produced and hosted by William Swafford. Music was put together by William Swafford.